Mr. Jim Kaufman, thank you for having us to your studio today.
Thanks
Much
for coming.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Kind of where I want to start is from the very beginning and then kind of working our way into how we end up here, how this room comes about, all of that. So if you can kind of take me to the beginning of your road, your journey, where everything started, we'll start there.
Yeah, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up in a really competitive and awesome music scene, playing in bands, and started a band called Opiate for the Masses when I was 18 with a bunch of my friends that I went to school with, and kids from like the neighborhood, kids from other bands in town, and did that for 10 years. During that time period, I was like the guy that made the demos for the band
Gotcha.
at the beginning, and that led into working closely with the producers that produced the band, guys like John Travis, Ulrich Wild, Charlie Clouser, and then I moved to LA, and started working with Charlie as his assistant in the studio. He was working on the Helmet record, Size Matters, that I got to work on, and he was also at the same time scoring the Saw films. So I was around for that.
How old are you when you're starting the bands? This is high school, so you're probably what, like 14,
I was
15?
yeah, I was playing in bands since I was like 12.
Oh, shit.
My parents put me in piano lessons when I was like 3 or 4. So music has just kind of always been my thing. I've never
Yep.
not done music.
And what did you take to first? You started with the piano, you end up guitar.
Yeah, I mean, I started on piano. When my hand got big enough, I started playing guitar. I also play the drums. I don't really play any of those instruments anymore. I mean, I can play everything, but my brain thinks of music on a piano pretty
Yep.
much. But yeah, I started playing in bands when I was like 12 or 13. But Opiate for the Masses I started when I was 18 years old, and I left the band when I was 28, maybe 27, just because at the time I'd been in the studio a lot, not only producing Opiate for the Masses records, but producing other records for other bands. I remember one time I was in the studio with Ed Stasium. I was probably 19. Ed produced the Ramones and
Yep.
Talking Heads, unbelievable producer. And we were tracking, and he hit the button. He was like, "Hey, Jim, at some point in your life, you're going to have to realize which side of the glass you're supposed to be sitting on." And I looked at him. I was like, well, "I don't even know what that means. Let's do another take." And in hindsight, I get it. I'm better at taking somebody else's idea and helping them flush it out. I'm a finisher.
Yep.
So I started. I think the first record I ever produced that said produced by Jim Kaufman on it was a Black Moods record when I was maybe 22 or 23, and then by the time I was about 27 or 28, I was just done touring, and I wanted to be in the studio. In the studio,
Yeah.
I get like 14 hours of music a day.
Yeah.
I get up super early and I come in here and I mix, and then I spend some time with my family, go to the gym, and I come back and I track, and I get a lot of music in. And when I was on the road, even if you're the headlining band, maybe you get an hour of music, an hour and a half of music in, because you have to do the press and driving and all the other stuff. And I want as much music in my life as possible. It makes me happy. So
So you start bands in high school, you come to LA. You're how old when you get to LA?
I was 22 when I moved to LA.
22 when you get to LA. So your very first job, or like, what is that? Take me through, getting to LA for the first time. What year is that?
2003,
Wow.
something like that.
Okay, got you. So we're still in CD era.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the record industry is still,
Yeah.
what it
Oh,
used to be.
absolutely. I mean, so my first big record that I ever worked on was Helmet Size Matters, and I was the assistant. I went and got coffee and sandwiches, and I edited. We actually used a beta version of Pro Tools HD. It was the first record ever made on an HD rig, which
No
was very
shit.
cool. So I worked for Charlie, and but at the time we were, my band was still touring, so I'd be in LA for a couple months and we'd work, and then I'd go on the road for 6 months and come home, and that kind of vibe. And I kind of popped around between doing some film scoring for a while on my own, straight to DVD Lionsgate movies kind of thing, just low budget B movies, and trying to engineer and produce other bands.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So as far as just what's different about the time, because I can imagine, I'm just trying to envision what it was to be in 2003. You're in these studios, you're working with these bands. What would you say, I guess, do you miss about that time, or are there things that you miss about, the industry then versus what it is now?
Well, I mean, there was definitely bigger budgets. I think on the Helmet record there was, it was the Page had been back with Interscope, so it was a major label, and massive budgets, and we'd spend 3 weeks at Cello, which is East West Studio A, just recording the drums. Johnny Tempesta played the drums on it. It was a great experience. I mean, I was so young, I didn't really, I knew what was going on, but really on a technical level, I wasn't as far along as I probably should have been to have that job. But I was Charlie's friend and his assistant, and he kind of threw me in the deep end, and it made me a lot better as an engineer, and just to kind of understand what goes into it. But definitely the budgets were different, and the time it took was, people were just kind of using Pro Tools in a new way then. And now it's like, it's very fast. Like, people are, we make records extremely fast in comparison to how fast things were made back then.
Do you like that?
I love it because I love the speed of record making now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that also has to go with the price of hard drive.
Yeah.
Back then it was $300 or $400 to get 30 gigs on this, Atto drive that you could only take in and out 10 times before the pins would break. And so you don't save takes that aren't good. You threw everything away. You only kept what you thought was good.
Yeah.
And now we keep everything. I mean, I'm in record the entire time that we're in the studio.
Yeah.
And I just keep everything. And hard drive basically is free. The space is, you get 8 terabytes fits on your keychain.
Yeah.
So it's just a different workflow and kind of mindset of grab everything and then kind of put it together later, which a lot of people, I think, use as a crutch now. I'm big on capturing real performances and pushing the artist to really get something that happens magically in the room. In this space here, I try to record drums, bass, guitars, keyboards all at the same time, and do minimal overdubs, because I think that's what kind of sets the records that I make apart from other records, is that there's actual performances, and
you can feel it.
You can feel it, and there's like some magic that happens that musicians in a room pushing and pulling against each other, and that moment that's captured. You can't get that with a computer, and I think that's really important. So I think it's kind of come back around. Like back then, when I first started making records in LA, that's what we were trying to do, is get these great performances, and then it got to where everything was being so over edited and so quantized and so beat detected that it might as well have just been techno. Rock records were so computer. It just sucked the life out of them. And now I feel like people want live again, and 100%. I think that comes from when you're a kid and you're, this generation of kids that go to these concerts and it's just 2 guys standing by a laptop hitting play. That's not real. There's no life in that at all. And so what I'm excited about is having this new generation of kids that are really fucking stoked to see a drummer and a guitar player and are gravitating to records that are flawed, and flawed in the best of ways, that because humans make music, and we've taught computers how to make music, but that's not how it's supposed to be.
So are we seeing the circle go? Well, I guess it is a circle naturally. Like, are we in that tail end of, like, are we going to end up where it all started? Because my thought is, when we talk about the time it takes, or time it used to take to make those records, would that be not what made them great? And if we're doing things quickly now, are you hoping, are you going to see, that circle close on, like, okay, we're going to end up taking time, greater budgets for records? Like, does it end up there? Do you hope it ends up there?
I certainly hope it ends up there. I think that, historically, a band would go into the studio and there would be a finite amount of time, like, okay, we're Fleetwood Mac and we're getting off the road and we're going to go into, the Village and record, and
spend $1 million to do Rumors or something
right,
like that.
And we have 12 days to get this done, and then we have to go back on the road.
Yeah.
And there is magic in that, because you have to deliver in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And now I think, everybody has their own recording gear. They can go back and edit it and punch and work on it as much as possible, as much as they want, to make it quote unquote perfect. And there's an upside to that for sure. But I think that, you know, the fact that rock music is coming back and people want live instruments and people want to hear bands play again is going to put us back in a position where bands have to go back into a recording studio and actually record and recording, an actual drum kit and miking a guitar cab and doing all these things. It's not as easy as opening GarageBand and programming a beat and using a fake guitar. And it takes having a skill set that a lot of young musicians don't have because they were raised with a computer that was doing it all for them. So I'm hoping that will encourage parameters being put on the recording process and clocks running out. Because again, I think records need to be made, they need to be finished, and they need to be put out. If you sit there and you overcook a record, it just sucks the life out of it. And I've watched records that I've worked on, records that that I love, bands that I love, songs that I love. I've watched them go through that process of just over picking at something until it's dead. And it's sad to see. So I encourage deadlines, and I encourage finishing records and putting them out.
Interesting. So as far as what you're working on now, or I don't want to go there yet. I kind of want to still go down this road of just what people are focusing on now, what bands are focusing on. Do you see, because I'm listening to a ton of music all the time, and I'm seeing less and less, not many rock bands that I enjoy listening to in the US right now. So kind of to your point of, how do we get to this place where more people are playing live? That means more young kids have to pick up drumsticks and guitars. But to make those records, there have to be more people like yourself who are learning these things. So are you seeing any sort of shortage, or are there people out there like yourself in abundance teaching kids how to do this stuff? Or, what does that world look like?
I mean, I honestly, I don't know. There's a lot of recording schools that are teaching, engineers how to record a drum kit. And I work with a few of those schools. It just takes a long time. It takes a bunch of trial and error. And you have to come up with your own technique, and that just takes, they say it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours. And I think it's way more than that. I think it takes 100,000 hours.
Well, that's the thing, is like,
do it.
Yeah. I've been in studios where I talk to the kids that are coming from the recording schools, and it's like, it's no shade on those schools or anything like that. But then I talk to guys like you who learned in the bigger studios from guys who were making those records. And there seems to be a disconnect between what's being taught in school and then what you learn from being in the game and around the studios and around the gear and all of that stuff. Not that the schools don't have the gear.
No, absolutely. It just takes a long time, and it also has to be about what the goal is. I think that a lot of kids that go to the recording schools, they want to learn how to make beats, or they want to learn how to record. But the curriculum at the schools it has to be broad for the entire student body. I was lucky to learn. I didn't go to recording school. I just learned from great producers that produced my band, and being around big bands like Helmet that were making these records in front of me that I could watch and learn how they were doing it, and then I could go home and try it myself. And I had 2 channels and 1 microphone, and it took me a long time to be able to get all of this gear so that I could actually make 24 channels of awesome recording gear, so I could make a record that sounds the way that I wanted to. But you can do that with a Mackie 24x4 and some 57s. It just takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of trial and error, and you have to have a goal. Like, my goal is to make killer rock records that have life, that sound like a band is playing, because it is a band playing. Not get the drums, edit the drums, get the bass, edit the bass, get the guitars, edit the guitars. That's not a band playing. That's a computer playing. So you also have to have the right musicians around you. If somebody coming up, if they don't have great musicians around them, it's going to be really hard to make that kind of record. If that's their goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's go back to just your kind of timeline here as we lead up to, getting in the space, working on the records you are now. So you're 22, you're in the studio, you're doing that thing. What happens from 22 to 29? You're touring that whole time?
Yeah.
So how is the band, Opiate for the Masses was the name of it. Successful band?
Marginally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we toured, we had a couple record deals, we put out a couple records.
Yeah.
We got to play with some amazing bands. It was a great experience. We did Warped Tour 3 times, and opened for all the big bands in the genre. We were an active rock band, industrial kind of undertones. So there's a lot of electronics I love to program. But yeah, I toured. I toured a ton. And we lost our deal, and we had to get another deal, and we remade our last record, which was called Manifesto, like 3 times. I made it once, John Travis made it once, Ulrich Wilde made it once.
Wow.
And then we kind of put all of that together when it finally came out.
Yeah.
With a new label. And it was a great experience because I was in LA, because I think the Spore, the record before that, came out in 2005. We toured. We did 300 shows that year.
Wow.
We were the second most active band in the world that year. Seven Dust played like 305 shows, and we played 300. Playing 300 shows in a year is
so crazy.
Really hard to do.
Holy shit! So that's not only U.S.
No, I think we played. That was U.S. and Canada. I don't know. I think that's it that year.
That's crazy. That's a lot.
We were on the road the entire time.
Yeah.
And if we didn't play, it was because we were driving, and we couldn't. We had to get to the next show, and it was too far.
Yeah.
So we really, really worked. And then when we got off the road, I was in LA for a couple years, getting the new deal and making the record.
Yep.
And all of that time period, just really informed me on how to grow a rock band and what rock bands need, and how to make a record. How not to make a record, I was just learning a lot in that time period, and then in 2008 I left the band. I quit. We were supposed to go back on the road, and I just didn't get on the airplane. And
take me through that. Like, what's in your head at that time? What have you experienced from being down a little bit? Probably like doing some reflecting.
Yeah, I mean, my there was just some internal conflict in the band, and there was some stuff happening with my family, health-wise, and I just didn't have it in me. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And really, what it boiled down to is that I wanted to be in the studio. I didn't really want to be on stage anymore. And I don't identify as an artist really at that point in my life. I mean, I do now because I feel like my art is making records.
100%.
But I just was, I felt pigeonholed because I love a lot of genres of music. I love rock music. I love metal. I love country. I love pop. I love hip hop. I love stuff in all the genres. I really love trip hop. Like, I was massively into Portishead and Massive Attack and stuff like that at that point in my life. I still am. Depeche Mode. So I felt like the band was being pushed to be more metal, which I really am not. That's just not who I am.
Yeah.
But I get that we needed to be active rock, and that's the lane. And the new metal thing was really big at that time, and we were kind of being pushed into that. And it just wasn't who I was. And I just felt like, I wanted to get off the road and be able to make more music and make more records in more genres. And it took a long time. Doing a career change at 28 is challenging.
Yep.
And it took me 10 years to get, maybe 5. I don't know. It took me a long time to get out of that identity, because that's what people identified me with. They were like, "Oh, Jim, the guitar player from Opiate for the Masses," and that's what I saw when I looked in the mirror. That's just who I was.
Was that hard mentally to kind of make that identity shift? But almost you're just realizing at that age, kind of part of you that you want to bring to the forefront. So it's almost, you're not changing identity. You're just maybe finding a little bit of yourself.
Growing up. I mean, and I think that's a decent age to grow up. Like, I think most people go through something like that around that time. And I just realized that I want to be in the studio. I don't want to be on a bus. I don't want to be on stage. I don't miss it. I've never missed being in a band once.
That was my other question. Was there any regret of making that shift at that point?
I've never missed it one time. It's just not. I played enough shows.
You are now 28, 29. You leave the band. Take me through that next couple years of making that shift. Are you working in other studios? Are you building out your own space? Like, what are you doing in that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just at that point really starting to try to develop bands. I'm working for other bands, as a hired engineer, producer. I really wasn't mixing much at the time, but I was, slowly building my studio and developing some artists. I had a record label called American Voodoo for a while that I was, trying to develop stuff on, and that none of the bands in that era worked. It was just all just me attempting to figure out what I was doing.
Yeah, what year is this in LA?
2008, maybe 2009.
Interesting. So that's like tail end of all the bands are kind of still in LA. I guess that what's that next couple of years look like? Like, are bands still active in LA, or what was the scene like?
Yeah, I mean, people are. Yeah, I mean, people are here. It was just an odd time for me because again, my identity was I was the guitar player for this band, and now I'm no longer the guitar player for the band, and I'm just trying to figure out like where my role is. And I wasn't really a mixer. So I was producing and I was engineering, but I couldn't really get the records to sound the way that I wanted to, coming out into my ears from the speakers. Like I hadn't gotten that figured out yet. And that just takes a long time.
Yeah.
I was trying and I was learning and I did some good stuff. At that point I teamed up with Kenny from AWOL Nation, the keyboard player, through my friend Burko, who's their manager. And we started producing bands together. So we did like Night Riots, and we worked on that Love Gloom record. So we did Nothing Personal and Fangs and Breaking Free. And I actually mixed Breaking Free, which is the big song on that record. And that was kind of the first big song that I mixed. And at that point, I got really interested in mixing because I finally had enough gear to get it right on the way in. I bought my Neve. I did Beware of Darkness. I started working with Danny Warsnop on his solo stuff, and I was really kind of being able to start to get the shit to come out of the speakers the way that I heard it in my head. And that took a long time. And then Kenny and I, Kenny moved to Thousand Oaks. We stopped working together, and I'm living in Santa Monica, and just producing as much as I can at that point. Work for hire stuff, that period was a lot of just getting paid to make records while I was just etching away at my skill set. And then I have this wonderful manager, Andrew Brightman, who's been my manager for 10 years. And I'm talking with Andrew on a daily basis, and we're talking about, how do you make a name for yourself as a producer in such a saturated marketplace. There's 170,000 songs that come out a day on Spotify. That's as of 6 months ago, right? So how do you make a name for yourself? And with every kid in the world that has a laptop calling themselves a record producer, like what do I do? And so we really focus on artist development, which is what I've been doing since I was a kid. I've been making bands since I was 11 years old. I really, I love grunge music. When I was 11 or 12 years old, Alice in Chains Facelift came out, and then, Pearl Jam 10 and Dirt and Stone Temple Pilots Core and Purple and these records that
10's
really...
the first album I ever listened to. It was in my dad's truck. Turned it on, I was like, holy fuck.
Record,
yeah.
Yeah. I listened to that record on repeat.
Yeah. No, me too. I just saw them at the Forum when they were in town. Yeah, it was sick.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. I mean, I love Pearl Jam. The first 10 and the next two records are up there and some of the best records ever made, in my opinion. So, I go to the gym. I listen to these records all the time. I love to work out. And what's missing in my life is new grunge music, right? Like I'm wanting new music because all those guys died, and so I start thinking about, artist development and what's missing in the marketplace. Selfishly, I want grunge music because I want to work out to grunge music, and there isn't any new music.
Yeah.
And then at that point is when I met Maddie and Graham, who came over to visit Ryan, my assistant, my studio assistant. He's my engineer now, but then he was my intern. They picked up my guitars, and they were playing Fleetwood Mac covers.
No shit.
And
that's funny.
Yeah.
Hearing the records now and then thinking about them playing Fleetwood Mac covers.
Dude, and they were just two kids that were on spring break. They were in college. And they
This is what year now?
This is 5 years ago now. So this is 2019.
No kidding.
I mean, it was
Wow. So you guys, that's way longer than I thought you guys would have been working together.
Well, I mean, we had the pandemic hit us in the face, you know? So maybe it was 4 years ago, something like that. It's a long time. We've been working together for a while.
Yep.
And these are just two college kids that grew up together with Ryan in Dallas or wherever they're from, Midlothian, which is outside of Dallas.
Yep.
And I said, so what are you guys doing? You know, and they were like, oh, we're in college. And I was like, together? And they're like, no. You know, he goes to school in Iowa and I go to school in Colorado or some shit like that. And I was like, drop out of college and move to Los Angeles and let's start.
The producer would say that, yeah.
Yeah, and then they did. And when I heard them sing together, it was an automatic thing for me. Like, oh, these guys, it sounds like an Alice in Chainsy thing. There's like a real depth to their vocals. They hadn't flushed it out yet. They weren't where they are now. But I saw something very raw and very real in them. And at the point where I was in my career, I wanted to develop new artists. And these kids had great voices and had a thing. And I identified it. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, let's do this. And so they moved to LA. They dropped out of college.
No shit.
Yep.
They did.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So take me like kind of step by step of like, you meet these kids, they floor you. You're at a point now where you're working with a group of artists like outside of them, or you're looking for the one you want to give everything to?
I'm looking for the one I want to give everything to. I'm producing a lot of bands at the time, you know, mostly like, you know, just getting paid to make records kind of vibe,
gotcha.
Which is a great living. People, and I have a lot of friends that do that and they're happy and that's cool. No problem with that. And I still do that. I have clients, you know, that pay me to make records for them.
But dudes like you, I know, are like chasing that dragon a little bit of like, I want to make like a stamp of like, what's happening now? Like, what's the next thing?
Well, really, I wanted to make music I wanted to work out to. That's really what I'm not lying, man. That's what it is. I wanted to make some new fucking grunge. So they moved to LA, and you know, I kind of forgot about it, honestly. I was really into it, and I was like, all right, you guys should, you know, and I went about my life. Like, you know, I have a girlfriend, and, you know, I have businesses, and I'm, you know, doing my thing. And Ryan's who's sitting right there. Ryan hits me up and he's like, hey, remember my friends that you told to drop out of college? They're here. And I was like, oh, shit.
No shit.
Fuck, I guess I got to make these guys a record, you know? So they move here, and it's like March 11th, 2020, you know? And like a week after.
Oh, wow. Yeah, shit.
So a week after they get here, like, there's no food on the store shelves. And the fucking... the LA just shuts down,
and they like came out living together.
Dropped out of college and they moved to LA. Like, what do we do?
They're just in exactly. Yeah. So they in an apartment. Like, what?
So they got like a studio apartment in Inglewood, and they're like,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and they're like, they got first responder jobs or whatever they called it then. Like, they're working at a grocery store, so that it was like have a
job. Like COVID jobs.
COVID jobs. You know, so that they could still work because they dropped out of college. They needed money. You know. And they're in an apartment in Inglewood, and they're just songwriting. Like, they're sending me work tapes, acoustic guitar and vocal, and they probably sent me, I mean, I can't even count. Wow. And I was just like, nope.
Fuck yeah.
You know, rewrite that, try this, I like that, you know, whatever. And eventually we had 6 songs, which are Belly Up, Black Road, Anyway I Die, a few of these songs that were on the original EP, which is now the LP. And so we started recording, and they had a different name back then, and a different drummer, and we just kept them. I just kept them in writing mode.
It totally shows, especially with the LP. And you know, anybody who's listening to this that doesn't know this band should totally check them out if you like old school kind of Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, because it's the first record from a band that I've listened to in like the last decade. That's a younger band that just came out that I can't stop listening to. Like, I listen to Live Like This and Bad News probably once a day.
Oh yeah.
Like, literally. And the first thing I did was look up, okay, I love the way this sounds. I love this band. Who was the dude that did it? And that's pretty much why I'm here right now, is that I, you know, kind of dove into your stuff. And we've been in, I feel like, the same circles for a while. Like Cody Jasper and the Them Evils guys, Jake and Jordan, like, always been good friends. And like, you know, you've obviously done great things with them. But Return to Dust was the thing for me where I was like, this is something that's special. Graham and Matt and Graham came to a show I was doing at Hotel Cafe. I found them on TikTok.
Right.
And they came and played Live Like This live. And my girlfriend wouldn't shut the fuck up for a week after about them, because she's like, that's what I'm saying. I was like, all right, look away. You know, that's why she doesn't come to the shows anymore. But no, I just noticed on stage, like, there was no nerves. And you see in so many young artists that there's nerves. The songwriting might not be there yet. There's just little things you notice after seeing so many performances of like, I don't know about these guys. But I saw those dudes, and I never want to be the guy that's like, oh, I knew from day one this band was going to be on the road and they have, followers now. But there's just a difference. And I think hearing you say that you push them to write and scrap that and like do this or whatever, like that's what shows now, I think, in the music.
Absolutely. I mean, look, they're both extremely talented dudes. They're both, I mean, I literally, both Matt and Graham are two of my favorite songwriters alive at this point. And they've really, really put the work in.
Yeah.
And they take feedback and criticism very well. And I was really, really hard on them. Like I was super hard on them on their live show, on their songwriting, on their performance in the studio, on everything. We really took our time and built it up. And so we started recording. We started recording more. Started writing more. There's kind of a revolving door of drummers at that point for them. Their original guy had left, and we had a couple intermediate guys that filled in. And I had met London through the Them Evils guys.
Yep,
actually,
me too.
Came to a session or a meeting that we were talking about doing some more Them Evils music, and he had just played a show with them as a hired drummer. And so I had met London and gave him a Return to Dust record when I met him, and had kind of kept my eye on him and was staying in touch with him and kind of building the Return to Dust business. And that was a very long grind of, we put out a song every 6 weeks.
Yep.
And shot music videos and did content, and then started getting independent record offers, which I kept turning down. I had the band signed to a production deal. And so nice. I was just turning these, smaller offers down.
Yep.
And there was some management teams and stuff that were coming at us, and it was just about like building it until we could get the right team around the guys, because, I don't want to just make a record or build a band that's going to be heard by a small group of people. My goal with Return to Dust is for them to be the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
And that's going to take some great team, members, some people around them. They can take it to the next level. So we start rolling singles. We had a TikTok moment last summer 2023 with Belly Up. That's obviously, that song overperforms every time we put anything around it. So we kind of keep this going. We put out the EP. We keep singles rolling. We're turning down offers. The band's, playing some shows. We still don't have the right drummer. They play New York. It's not happening. And then I get I keep bugging London, like, hey man, you should think about, and it just all worked at the right time. The drummer that they had left the band. It wasn't the right fit. And then, London was out of the band that he was in. And London joins the band, and the band at that time was just about to play some Danny Wimmer festivals. So they played Welcome to Rockville and Sonic Temple. And right at that time, we start getting some heavy offers from some major labels. Nice. And so we put out LP1. And we kind of at that point are out of runway, because the plan was to roll singles until we.
Now it's all out.
Now it's all out.
Yeah,
we're sitting on 40 others unreleased.
No, 100%. Yeah, if they're writing as much as you say there, I'm like, I know the songs.
Yeah, we have tons of songs.
Yeah.
But the album's out. London's in the band. The band signs to Lava Republic.
That's my question. Is so what? Just what you're willing to disclose, or just in regards to the business end.
The deals are done. So
what made you go with them? Because you've obviously turned a handful of deals down. There's been probably managers or agents, a lot of dudes. Once a band gets to that point and everyone's hot on them, that's when the guys start coming around and they're like, okay, this is happening.
The band and I really love the vibe of Lava Republic. I mean, Jason Flom is a legend. He gets it. Monty Lippman and the Republic team is the best label in the world, in our opinion. And the band, they signed with Lava. I mean, it's great. Cool. And at that time, no management yet. Now Danny Wimmer and Joe Guzik are the managers. So Danny's heavily involved on a daily basis. Joe's great. And Michael Arfin is now their booking agent. So all within like a 3-week period, we did the label deal, the management deal, and the booking agent.
No shit.
And then the band went out with Chevelle over the summer, and we actually just did 6 new songs last week. And they're going out with Seven Dust in a week.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of other stuff that's I can't disclose that's happening after that tour-wise. Sure. But my goal with that is, when you look at other bands have to write a record, make a record, go on tour, get off tour, write a record, make the record, go back on tour. And what I want with Return to Dust and with the other bands that I'm developing is for that tour cycle to not be an issue. Because we can make records so fast and we can do it here. Whenever the band's off the road and they have a handful of songs, we make more songs. So,
when you say not be an issue, you mean the taxing nature of, or what it used to be, being on the road and then instantly having to go through a long recording process and then right back on the road. You're talking.
Well, I think it having to come off the road to write and record loses momentum.
Yeah.
And in a marketplace like we have today and the social media presence and all the thing, I would love Return to Dust to never have to come off the road.
Gotcha.
They can come off for 6 days or a week or, a month, and we can record and they can go back on the road. So you
can kind of churn and burn and not lose the true, because, with so much coming out, with content being the way it is, with the need to just stay relevant.
Yeah.
It's like you take a year off the road, you're fucked. Like people are going to stop calling because there will be somebody
anymore. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in rock music is really coming back. If you look at all the analytics, hip hop's on its way out. And the guitar is coming back. Fender had their best year last year again.
No shit.
Gibson's doing well. Little kids are playing guitar.
Yep.
And I know it's going to take one band to blow it wide open, and my bet is that it's Return to Dust.
Oh yeah. Nice. Interesting. Yeah. No, like I said, I haven't stopped listening to that record. I think it's great, and now it is kind of blatantly obvious. A lot of my questions were, you see a young band like that, how much it both cost to even move out here to do all those things as a young band. It's probably why you're not seeing as many. So I knew there was something behind the door, and hearing how much work you've put in, and just whether it's the songwriting or all these other things, it's kind of obvious that that's what the final product has turned out to be. So as far as your experience with these bands, not just Return to Dust, but now say you have that project, things are going well, you're gonna kind of put that effort there. What do you look for in because I assume you want to do multiple Return to Dust,
Sure.
and have your hands in multiple pots. What are you looking for? What stands out to you? What would be your advice to a young band?
Well, what I'm looking for is the voice, right? And I don't just mean the actual physical voice. I mean like the voice of the band. What is the band saying? Obviously, it starts by having an amazing voice. With Return to Dust, you have 2 amazing voices.
Yeah.
They share a voice in their songwriting. Maddie and Graham write together, and they have this wonderful voice that they share. But their content, their social media, what they're saying as a band is also an important voice, So I'm looking for the voice. And I just found a new band from Indiana called Coiler, which I'm working with.
Interesting.
Which is a 2-piece. It's just drummer and guitar singer, kind of like White Stripes, Black Keys, but heavier. And he's got a killer voice. Not only his voice, but his story. It's about. I look for that. I look for a really unique voice. I look for drive. And an unwillingness to hear no, because it's making it as a rock band is insanely challenging, and the odds are completely stacked against you. It's you've got a 1 in a million shot, but it just takes really hard work and relentless effort, and also being coachable. Like what we have with Maddie and Graham is they listen to feedback and they implement changes based on constructive criticism, and not all artists are willing to do that. Some kids are really stuck in their ways and think they know everything, and it's an ever-changing environment. It's a very fluid situation, with the marketplace is ever-changing because of the social media. You have to be making these different kinds of content, and like, should a musician know how to make content?
I was about to say, like, are you thinking about that? Because obviously Return to Dust, like, you did those songs, they did well on social media. I imagine either Matt or Graham, one of those guys, is talented.
Graham's the social media guy there.
Yeah.
I mean, Maddie's got a wonderful set of skills as well, but Graham kind of heads the social media for that band.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's part of it, like, in my generation, like, you grew up, you were a musician, you're not a marketing person, but now you have to be that. But that's what I mean by the voice, because that's part of what you're doing as an artist.
Yep.
It's like what your songs are about and what your social media is about. That's a shared voice. of
Yeah.
what you're doing artistically.
Yeah.
And the kids that can really lean into that and are excited by it and utilize that as a way to express themselves artistically.
So are you
That's where it
thinking
is.
when you're say, you mentioned when they're sending you a ton of songs, you're saying no to certain things. Is that period strictly focused on the art? Like, are you thinking about, oh, this would play well if it's on a TikTok or something like that? Like, are you conscious of that, or are you strictly art first and then we figure that out?
It's not a conscious decision on like what will work on the social media thing. I'm looking for cohesion, and you know, a sound, a feel, a voice that really is fresh and feels symmetrical. Like the image of the band, the way that they look, the way that their social media looks, and the way that the songs sound, the way what the songwriting is about, that all has to be the same. You know, it has to fit, and there has to. And if you zoom out, like it took me a long time to realize that like the Return to Dust build was selfish on my part about wanting new grunge. I didn't know that I was doing it at the time. I was just filling a hole in my like. How many times can you listen to Dirt? My favorite record.
Seriously.
I love it. I still listen to it.
I've recently in my later years, just a quick tangent on Alice in Chains, but like last 5 years, I've gotten so into them. I love Pearl Jam, grew up on like those bands. I just never, for whatever reason, never got into Alice. And then, I don't know, this might be an unpopular opinion, the Dinosaurs record. What's it? Breath Like
the Devil. Dinosaurs.
Devil, yeah. I love that album. Like, love it. And I think like it's so under, because obviously everyone loves Lane. But then you get into those records, like for Jerry to have kept going, that dude dies and he just keeps going. And then William enters and like those harmonies, I can tell, and this is, to the point of Return to Dust, it's interesting for a band to obviously have influence, but to get to a point where they're influenced, but not copying, not trying to fill shoes that are too big for them or maybe that they shouldn't even bother trying to fill. And I thought that Return to Dust did that really well. There's this blend of like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, but then themselves, like you can hear their voice through all of that.
Absolutely.
So I assume that's probably what initially, drove you to them.
I mean, I love Alice in Chains. I've always loved Alice in Chains. Dirt's my favorite record of all time. Favorite rock record of all time. But I mean, again, Graham and Maddie are doing this thing that is them. They aren't trying to be a grunge revival band. They are writing music artistically that really is who they are. Their 43-year-old producer who grew up listening to Alice in Chains may influence some of that sound a little bit. But it's not, I didn't hand it to him. I saw something that was very authentic in them.
Well, dude, the first TikTok I saw was he's talking about his dad committed suicide. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, give me more of this, like you have problems. I like that you have problems. I like that your music reflects that, because it's like, I have a dad that passed away and it's like, there's some middle ground there. So I instantly, am drawn to that kind of like heaviness, not just in the music, but because to be heavy, you have to be heavy. You know what I mean? That
actually all went down when we were in the studio together.
No shit.
During the making of the first EP.
Really?
Yeah, and Graham channels that. And there's pain. There's real pain.
Yeah.
And this is therapy for Graham and his songwriting. And Maddie and Graham and Ryan, they all grew up together, like as they were in elementary school together.
Wow.
So the family dynamic stuff and that Graham writes about was prevalent throughout their relationship. And Maddie went through it with Graham too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Maddie's dad, who's a great guy, Alex, is kind of like all of their dads, because they kind of all hung out at Maddie's house or whatever. And so it's a real thing, and that's what I think is working about Return to Dust with the kids. Because if you look at the demographic, like the kids that are listening to Return to Dust are 16 through 24 and 57% female.
No way.
Yeah,
that's cool. Hell yeah, nice job, guys.
Really good for a rock band.
Yeah,
whose usual listenership is 40-year-old males.
Exactly.
Guys like me.
Yeah, people who wish like Zeppelin would go or come back or something like that. Yeah,
guys that go to Tool concerts.
Exactly. I was at all the Tool shows when they were in town. Hell yeah.
But I think what that's about is that it's about authenticity.
Yeah.
And it's real. The songwriting's real. Their sound is real. They're real. This is just who they are. And for me, an older guy, I see it as a cycle coming back. I see it as like, oh, cool, the return of grunge or the return of real rock and roll. But it's not what that is. It's just the pendulum swinging back and forth. When a kid grows up and music is two guys standing by a laptop, it's going to swing back and you're going to get bands that sound like Return to Dust. And that's been happening back and forth
Yeah.
since we invented the electric guitar.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and the synthesizer, and that kind of just goes back and forth. That happened in the 70s to the 80s, 80s to the 90s, 90s to the 2000s. It's just the natural ebb and flow of the music, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very interested, and I feel like a lot of the reason, like, I even want to sit down with people like yourself is to offer insight to, say, like a 13-year-old kid who's like, I want to be in a band, like I want to figure all of this stuff out. And you made some points about just how you do have a 1 in a million shot if you're gonna, you know, figure it out. One of the things that I've noticed as we get deeper into economy stuff and like things get a little crazier post-COVID, it's just so cost ineffective to be a band. So as far as, you know, how you end up on the road and you're figuring all these things out, if you're a young band, is your recommendation you get in a van and you're just like trying to play as many shows as you can, or is there a more strategic path maybe to like get to the gold and fucking, you know?
The thing is that everybody in the world has a phone in their hand at all times, and you can access that phone through TikTok and Instagram, and so if you're a young band, I would focus your energy on your content. But that's about branding, you know. A band is a startup; it's a company, and you have to have great branding. The guy that invented the Coke bottle, right? He said, you know, the glass Coke bottle.
Yeah.
He said, I want to make something that even if it's smashed into 1,000 pieces, you still don't know what it is.
Interesting.
You know, and I think that every company, every brand, every band should have that. You know, it really has to look and feel and you know, with Return to Dust, we have the Ouroboros, the logo.
Yeah.
You know, and Return to Dust, it sounds like the name of the band sounds like the band. I mean, you know what it is before you hit play.
Yeah.
You know, packaging is really everything. So I know if you're a 13-year-old kid, you're like, what is this guy talking about? I'm supposed to know how to market and package? No, but what you need to do is you need to be authentic. You got to do something that's real and that's really you know, and write as many songs as you can. It all starts with great songwriting. You have to have amazing songs, and you know, learn other people's songs, because how are you going to learn how to write unless you know how to play and what other songwriters do? And then, you know, there is a time in the trajectory of a band that you do need to get in the van and you need to go play a bunch of shows. But you know, if you look at Return to Dust, they only had played LA, and we had gotten, I mean, they played New York and a couple West Coast tours by the time they did their deal, but we'd gotten all over the world with their Instagram and their TikTok, and now on their first tour, they're selling $3,000-$4,000 worth of merchandise a night, because they get their fans that have been their fans through these online, you know, social media platforms that have felt engaged with the band from day one. And we did that by making music videos and lyric videos and kind of creating this entire ecosystem around the band that you can kind of get online and look up Return to Dust and enter their world. And every kid, you don't have to have a professional video crew to make a video. You have a phone. Yeah. And you know, you don't have to have a recording studio to make a record. You got GarageBand.
You know what's just hitting me now too is that, you know, I follow them on all the platforms and whatnot. I'm constantly staying up with these guys. They're never like, get ready with me today. Like, today I'm going to go get Starbucks or whatever. They're not right there like that. There's still a mystery to what they're doing, which is where social media breaks apart for me as it relates to rock and roll. It's like, I love that I don't know what's going through Chris Cornell's head when he's on stage, or Eddie Vedder, or, you know, any of those guys. And that's what social media kind of broke. They broke that wall because people feel like almost obligated, like I have to show every aspect of my life. So do you think was that a conscious thing when, you know, Return to Dust, they're putting out all of these, you know, posts and getting all these followers, but they're never like right there. They're always like a step away or a step removed that allows that mystique. Do you feel like that or no?
Yeah, I think all rock bands should be like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you know, I'm a little old for the social media thing. Like, I know that the younger kids are all about putting their entire lives on there.
Yeah, but that's what I hate.
Do we want to see that? Do you want to know what Maddie's eating for breakfast?
Literally, no.
I don't know.
There's probably some girls out there, like if a chick's watching, she's 60, she's like, I'd love to know what he's eating for breakfast.
Yeah, of course. Probably grilled chicken. But these, you know, they they do a good job of self-regulating that stuff, and it was through trial and error. We tried a bunch of different stuff, and what works and what do people gravitate to, and it's all about the music, right? So it's like we got to always be pushing it back to the live performances and the songs. And we've done a lot of content. We did a live at Red Bull Records version of the entire first LP, of them playing in the studio, just live tracking.
Wow. How did that come about?
Our friends at Red Bull offered us the studio for 3 days, and we just went in there and shot it and multi-tracked it, and it's awesome. And the band's also, they're really great at acoustic. Like Maddie and Graham, that's how I found them, is an acoustic guitar. They will melt your fucking heart with an acoustic guitar. So being able to, going back to like the 13-year-old, being able to identify what is unique about you and what are your skills. Like, can you really blow people away with an acoustic guitar? Do you need a bigger kind of production? What are you as an artist? And if you can really know who you are, and that can kind of be ever changing, like I always tell new artists that they need a mission statement, and that mission statement can be evolving. But if you know who you are, if you have parameters on art, putting parameters on art is really important. Because if you put parameters on art and then you push the edges of those parameters, that's where things get exciting. But if you don't have parameters, then there are no edges, And you're just making art.
Letting it all hang out.
So I think there was, younger artists need to identify who they are, who they really are. Authenticity wins, right? Who they are authentically, and really lean into that and focus that, and become more of themselves. Like it's not about chasing trends. Return to Dust does not sound like any of the popular bands right now. We made the band, they made their band because of who they were as songwriters, and it seems to be working with the kids because it's really, really them. And young artists should do the same thing. Like, don't worry about trends. Don't try to be the next Nicki Minaj or whatever's popular right now, because that's popular now. And if you're 13, you need to be popular in 2 or 3 years, and you don't know what that is. So why try to chase a trend? And I love Nicki Minaj. I'm not saying I don't.
But, don't come for me.
But don't chase a trend. Just be yourself and be the trendsetter. Because you don't want to be the 5th version of some popular band. You want to be the first, and then you want to have bands follow that.
More to your story. You obviously were in a band. You're in the band for 10 years or whatever it was, and you made a choice to really switch it up. Do you think in art, in bands, in music, whatever, there's a point where you have to be cognizant of when it's time to change? Or, how do you know when to take something fully the distance or when to change it up?
My dad always says you got to know when to leave the dance, like you gotta, and that's about self-regulatory shit that most people probably don't have. But I'm a firm believer in change. I think change is the only thing in life we can count on. And, you can't get too comfortable, and you got to look at things. And the trajectory of my band was that we were never going to be a huge band. We would maybe have been a mediocrely successful band forever, and I didn't want that life. And I was 28, and I was like, am I going to do this forever? No, let's do something that I can be really successful at, because I want to win. I want to win on the highest level. I want to be the biggest record producer there is on the planet, and I want to work with bands that are the biggest bands on the planet. And that's just not where my band was going.
Yep.
So, I think it's important to have those hard internal discussions, not only with yourself, but with the other artists that you're working with at the time, and to align with people that have the same goals. You're only as good as the weakest member on your team, right? So, it's important.
Yeah. Something that I've personally, this almost, as I'm thinking this in my head right now, like, will sound dramatic. If you told a 13-year-old kid, like, oh, I'm 32, it's like, that's the oldest dude in the world. But I'm 32 now, and it's like, I'm at a point in my life where I'm almost feeling the need to, like, hit the gas on certain things, almost like I need to make something happen. I need to, like, really find what my thing is going to be or whatever. As you get older, as you're finding, more bands, do you feel any pressure to, like, accelerate the maybe natural process of things? Like, are you like, okay, I have Return to Dust, they're doing this, like, I need to get the next one and the next one now? Do you feel that? Yeah,
absolutely.
That's good to hear because I feel the same pressure.
Oh, I want to do things faster, more. It's not about faster. It's about more efficiently.
Yeah.
I want to be more efficient, and I want to find new acts and help new acts faster than I was able to help Return to Dust. Again, with Return to Dust, we had the pandemic happen, and everyone did, So the timeline of that got messed up because the music business shut down. But I'm constantly looking for new artists. I want to help artists get where they need to go, which is building an audience faster. I want to make records faster and better. And I'm 43, so I'm not young by any means, and I'm always trying to get better.
Definitely. I feel like it would be a sin to not ask you a little bit just about the space. And just I guess take me through. You move in here, how you get to this space, just the layout, the design, just kind of like the
sure. So
the geeky stuff.
I've been moving around, renting houses in LA for 20 years. I was in Culver City,
Yep.
in like a house that had no guest house, renting, and the guy that I was renting it from called and said he had gotten fired, so I had to rent a house. And at that time, I was working with Kenny from AWOL, so we rented a house in Santa Monica. Me and my girlfriend Yasmina, and there was a guest house which Kenny and I shared as our studio. And that was really great for my life because I finally had some separation. Like before, my living room was my recording studio.
Jeez.
There was no separation. This is pre-kids. So
Yeah.
so I was living in Santa Monica with the guest house, and then Kenny and I stopped working together. He moved to Thousand Oaks. So I had this entire guest house, which is my last studio, and it was amazing. But I was renting, and when you're renting, it's hard to do the construction that's needed to have a really good room sonically. So I was looking for a house to buy for like 4 years, from anywhere from South Bay to Thousand Oaks. I mean, I just needed the right house. I would have loved it to be on the West Side because I love the West Side. And then this thing popped up, and I found it, and it was I bought it in October, and we built the studio from basically November to January. It took like 15-hour days, 60 days in a row. I worked with a wonderful studio designer named Hush at Sense and Sound is the name of his company. Super genius guy. And through trial and error, I knew what I wanted to do and how I needed it to be designed for my workflow. Because it's not just about sonics when building a studio. It's about like workflow and what do you need? Like my studio is going to be different than your studio because we just make records differently. So I mean, after having 20 years of studios that I built in my houses that I was renting, and I probably moved my studio 8 times in those 20 years. I knew like exactly what I wanted to get done. This is a guest house. My house is attached, but you can't walk. You have to walk outside to get in here. And I opened up all the walls. I put all the wires in the walls, which is really nice because I love a clean studio. I don't want to see a wire at all.
Even when there's so many,
and pop this window in, which is awesome. I can actually see the drummer and the musicians can see each other, which is really important for my style of recording.
Yeah, so how are you doing a band in here? Like, what is the...
Drummer in there, bass player in here, DI, guitar player in here, and I've got ISO cap in my shower, and then also in my living room, I have another 24 channels, so I can put a drummer in my living room if we want the big, like, blood, sugar, sex, magic kind of sound.
Yeah.
My drum room's more kind of tight and controlled. I love to do pre-production in the studio.
Yep.
I feel like getting the songwriting and stuff done beforehand is great. Sometimes I'll go into like a Mates or whatever rehearsal space and iron out pre-production, but I think there's also something about grabbing a song when the immediacy of like the part is really exciting to the band, and they're kind of figuring it out as they're like, whoa, this is really fucking cool. You get that energy, and that window helps with that because they can look at each other and they can see, they're doing the fills. I love this space. It's awesome. It sounds wonderful in here. It makes it a lot easier for me to get my final product closer on the tracking phase. So, like having a room that's designed that is treated, I can actually hear everything that's going into the computer, and mixing is so much easier because it's already 85-90% there on the tracking.
Definitely. No, this is It's an absolutely awesome space. Do you have any, like, is this doing it for you right now? Like, are you guys going to any other studios to record? Do you, like, when do you get to the point where you're like, I've laid it down in this room, but maybe another room has something that I'm looking for? Like, what?
The last record I did for this band, Coiler from Indiana, that I'm working with, it's like very tape saturated, like super. That's what, couldn't do it here. I don't have a tape machine. So we went there to use Dave's Studer, and his room's amazing. So I'll still go out. I'm actually going back there in October to work with a band called Normal Behavior that I'm producing with Keith from Atlas Genius. And so, yeah, I'll go to different studios. I loved going to United Studio B. That was my favorite drum room. That's where they recorded Anima, the drums. I love that room, but they closed it. I mean, you can still get it, but you can't get it for a small period of time. You have to rent it for a month, and budget-wise, that's just not possible. So I mean, I can do everything that I want to here, especially with the two different drum rooms. I just don't have a tape machine, and sometimes it's nice to just get out and go do a record somewhere else. I also have a small space in Arizona at my cabin in Sedona, so sometimes I'll do a record here, especially for a band that lives in LA, that like their girlfriend's here, the label's here, the manager's here, the agent's here, and I need to get them to kind of focus. I'll do the basics here, and then I'll go to Arizona and track the vocal and some guitar overdubs.
Gotcha. Nice. So just final kind of couple bits here. As far as artists that are looking for a producer, are you wanting people to be sending you music? Are you just kind of waiting for something that comes around that grabs your ear? Like, how are you going about just working with new projects?
Yeah, I mean, people send me music all the time. I'm always looking for new stuff for both to be hired and to develop. I get a lot of stuff just word of mouth. Like, artists that I work with will introduce me to their friends, or people hear the records that I make and hit me up on my website. Yeah. So I'm always looking. I'm always listening to new stuff. I'm really excited about the fact that there are a ton of young rock bands.
Yeah, I was about to say, are you just itching for another grunge band, or is that where you're at?
I mean, sure. I mean, it's going to be hard for me to. I don't really know what I'm looking for, because I'm looking for authenticity.
So whatever package that comes in, as long as it's real.
As long as it's real, I would love to find a new industrial band. Yeah. Because that's the space there isn't a new industrial band, and I grew up, working with Charlie from Nine Inch Nails, and I
was about to say, like, Nine Inch Nails, Massive Attack, like kind of the bands that
Depeche Mode, or something, something that's kind of more electronic. Because if you look at like the '90s, which are kind of coming back now, like I did the last Helmet record, I did the last Everclear record. There's all these bands are bands. If you look at Green Day's out playing stadiums, with Smashing Pumpkins opening, Oasis is coming back. There's like a '90s revival thing, and part of that '90s thing that was happening was Nine Inch Nails and Massive Attack and Depeche Mode and this electronic side, which I haven't seen a lot of bands yet that are doing that successfully. Yeah, there's some that are popping off, but I'm always looking for that, because I love synthesizers.
Yeah. Did you notice with like this revival thing? That's a great word to use, of just like what's happening right now in multiple genres and kind of specifically rock music. Like with the classic rock revival, like, have you noticed that there's a difference between the bands that are influenced trying to be themselves, and then there are bands that are on the charts touring around the world, but that literally just sound like, say, Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith? Like, have you noticed that at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, I can't say anything bad about a band that's out there working and successful. God bless. That's amazing.
Yeah. See, I can't, because I'm like, it just bothers me, because I'm like, it's sending the wrong message almost. Like, we're not able to recreate something, so we just have to do it just like it was done. Like, that's the only way it can exist. Which your comment of, like, a lot of those fans are like 40, 50-year-old dudes that are just like filling a hole in their heart because they can't see Robert Plant or can't see AC/DC.
But at the same time, I hear you, but I would rather that be happening than just more EDM.
Yeah.
And at least these young kids are seeing guitars and wanting to pick up guitars, wanting to play instruments. I think that, like, human beings have been playing music forever. We're listening to music in the womb with our mother's heartbeat. Like, we're supposed to be. Music is an important part of our society. It really is. And I think the computerized thing just sucks the life out of it too much. So I'm a big fan of kids playing guitars, however that looks. If it's a straight ripoff or if it's not, I'm a fan. So.
Okay, right on. My last question are just kind of like fun questions. If there was one song, you had to put your finger on one song to listen to for the rest of your life, and you could only listen to one song, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard question. I mean, uh, Karma Police?
Really? No
Sure.
shit. That is not from the grungy guy. That is not what I'd expect. I guess that's a nice one to listen to for the rest of your life.
I find myself listening to it a lot. I mean, that's a really, I mean, Comfortably Numb. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be something like that.
Right on.
It's, you know.
Right on. And if this is my last question for you. One band you can hang out with for an afternoon that's like, fills your childhood dreams. Who is it? What do you do?
Dead
and
or
why?
alive? Can they be dead?
Yes.
Man, that's a really hard one. The original I would hang out with the original lineup of Pink Floyd.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are you doing with them? Well, what's an ideal afternoon with you?
I would love to be, both in the recording studio with them, and able to access their live stage and just walk around and talk about gear with them all day.
That's exactly what I'd expect you to say.
Yeah.
All right, right on. Well, thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you
It
for
was a
coming,
blast
man.
talking.
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate you.